Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. I'm your host, John Ryan, and I have Rob Vino in the house today to start the show off. We may have some visitors stopping in. We're kind of trying to make this show as the end of the day, especially on Fridays, where guys are just meeting at the pub and having a couple beverages and talking sports, and just like we would if there was no COVID, except we're live on the air. So, Rob, what a weekend! I mean, welcome to the show first and foremost. That game, in my opinion, was the best college basketball game in the history of man. And one thing is bothering me, though. One thing is bothering me, and it seems like the media sentiment is saying that, boy, Gonzaga was lucky. They could barely even beat a bad team. Now, I think you'll agree with me that UCLA is not a bad team, and we probably grossly underestimated them. I tweeted our show about an hour and a half before the game, or an hour before the game, alerting you guys that I was just putting pizza money on UCLA because of that sentiment. It wasn't a published play for my clients, but it was something that I did, and it worked out. I mean, at the same time, Gonzaga could have won by 30. But I think that was clearly the best, most incredible finish you could ever write. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. So I'm sure you liked it too.
Yeah, and we've seen some. I mean, Villanova, obviously, with Chris Jenkins from however deep that shot was from to win them a national title at the buzzer was incredible. And we have UI and Tony gone back into the mid-'80s and just, drug out the couple in a row that were played them with the NC State Wolfpack at the buzzer as a huge underdog over Houston, and also the Georgetown, North Carolina game where Michael Jordan, as a freshman, hits a game winner in the closing seconds. So there have been some, but I don't know that there was anywhere you just expected the overtime period to come. I mean, after Johnny Juzang missed his shot, made his layup with 3.3 left, you just automatically, they're going to a second overtime. And it wasn't to be because the desperation heave went off the glass and in the basket, and I think UCLA was stunned, to tell you the truth, as was probably the majority of the country at seeing that go through. But boy, it's a shame somebody had to lose, right? Because they both played well enough to win. UCLA played Gonzaga better than anybody has played them so far this season, and I think we see a little bit maybe of recency bias affecting the point spread here in this game. As soon as Gonzaga opened, Baylor money came in. I was just doing another show for Wager Talk where we were discussing this game a little bit off air, and as we were talking, a pretty sizable amount of money came in on Baylor money line to pushed Gonzaga from minus 210 in a couple of spots down to minus 195, 190. So, of course, with money lines, you can get varied numbers across a whole landscape of books and shops. But I think that there's a little bit of Baylor sentiment. And it'll be interesting, John, to see how, as we get closer to 9:20 tip-off, to see how the money does come. Because generally speaking, the public loves favorite and over. But here, I think going back to what you said about the sentiment against UCLA, I think the sentiment here is Gonzaga barely got by. Baylor destroyed Houston. Baylor can beat Gonzaga. You know what I mean? A plus B equals C in recency bias. And perhaps we'll see Baylor money. Who knows? But I know we've seen some in the point spread already, and we've seen some on the money line within the last 60 minutes.
Yeah, and back to the sentiment, at one point I was looking at the box score, and Gonzaga, with about 11 minutes to go, was shooting 60% from the field and losing by 4. When was the last time you ever saw that? And then augment that to the fact that it was the number one team in the country for the whole season. They've been number one. So I definitely respectfully disagree with all the rhetoric of, that, boy, maybe Gonzaga is not that good. If anything, UCLA played so well that they now have taken Gonzaga to a new level of excellence. There's no other way to paint it, in my opinion. It's so obvious to me, and maybe I'm dead wrong, but Yes, sometimes I do get a little adamant, Rob, and today was one of those days where anybody that would listen to me, I was telling them, like, this is ridiculous. UCLA is a bad team. Maybe they were bad in October, when they were getting to know each other. But yeah, the other thing on that team too, the chemistry and especially the class that they acted with at the end of the game. Like, there was nobody with their head in a towel. They were, Suggs had mentioned that one of his best friends is on UCLA, the scorer.
Yeah.
Yes, I always I pronounce his name wrong, so I hesitate to even say it. But that was a cool story too, that they had gotten to know each other so well, and I mean, you really for the first time in this COVID stuff saw a game that ended kind of the way we're used to seeing it, where players were allowed to give high fives or even hugs to coaches and players, and it just was incredible. And I can't say enough about Cronin has taken a lot of daggers in his career, but he should be commended for the way he coached that game, because there was times, I think you would agree, Rob, that it looked like it was coming unhinged. Gonzaga got up 6 or 7, and then all of a sudden I actually thought, like, wow, 14 and a half might not be enough, and then all of a sudden, bang, 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 tie game. It just was. I still can't believe I had the privilege of watching that, and maybe I'm making it more of it what it was, but in my opinion, that was spectacular. So now, my next question, I'm interested to see, if you don't mind me interviewing you for a few minutes, how do you think the energy level, because that game obviously took a tremendous amount of physical and mental, emotional energy out of Gonzaga. And they've had a day to get back down to earth. And I guess I'll give you half the answer, is that a very good coach like they have got them together yesterday and said, look, we got to put our feet on the ground. The business is not done. We have one more game. This game against UCLA was great, but it means nothing right now. It means nothing. And I think he's the type of coach that would, maybe he did that even Saturday night. But do you think that fatigue factor is going to have any impact that'll maybe see Baylor with a strategy to come out of the gate and just run at any opportunity to try to, take advantage of any fatigue that the Gonzaga team might have?
Yeah, I don't know if it plays in, John, because they come off of those conference tournaments where they're playing back-to-back nights. So to have a day in between is almost, good for these players. Again, we're talking about 19 to 22-year-old kids who can get up and play basketball each and every day, full speed. But I think that the conference tournaments are more of an example of where fatigue could set in. But nowadays, it's funny. We see teams, and we saw it this year once again, that go on 4 and 5 day runs with no rest. So I don't know that the physical fatigue will come in. I think what's interesting about this game is I think head coach Scott Drew of Baylor said the most important thing for us is that we were scheduled to play Gonzaga earlier in the season. The game got postponed because of coronavirus, and we already have our game plan worked in. We worked on it before that game, so we didn't have to go through a lot of game planning before this game started. The game plan was already put in. We just went back and refreshed the kids' memories, and it's probably the same with Mark Few and Gonzaga. They probably had the same situation where they prepared for Baylor already a couple months ago, and can just reopen that folder and say, this is what we're going to do against Baylor. So that part, I think, actually helps, even with maybe some physical fatigue, if there was to be any. But I don't think it'll bother them. I do think you're right that Baylor will not back down. In the UCLA game, if we go back to the first half, maybe the first 10 minutes of the game, when Gonzaga would make a shot, and the game was fairly low scoring for about 6 minutes to start that game, because UCLA would inbound off a make. They would get the ball into Tiger Campbell's hands, and Tiger Campbell would basically crawl across midcourt. You saw what Mick Cronin wanted to do. Slow, slow, slower. And they did that for a little while until they found out that they could score rather easily, and I think the game just played tempo from about the 10-minute mark in the first half on, because as somebody who had the over, first 6 minutes you're a little bit nervous. This game's not quite, going the way we needed to get to this number. But then by like 9 minutes left in the first half, it was right on schedule, and from there it went way above schedule. I think the last time we were on, it was you, I, Tony, and Steve Merrill on Friday afternoon, where I think Steve brought up the question, do you play Gonzaga or do you play total? He was in a dilemma. And I had already played total. I thought 145.5 was far too small for that game. It worked out nicely. But tonight you're looking at 159. And I wonder if 159 is just not too small once again. I know it's a large number and a lot of things have to go right. But I think we saw last game that Gonzaga can go through a 6-minute lull where the scoring is, I think it was like 12-8 or something. And then the engines just turn on, and Baylor won't do what UCLA did to start. I think Baylor feels they have the athletes to go toe-to-toe with these guys. And, to make an analogy or a comparison to boxing, we may get to see something like back in the mid-'80s when Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns produced what may have been the best 8 minutes of boxing action ever in that 2.5-round fight. We may see
a great
that
point
tonight between these two.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love it. Now, the one thing I've been analyzing the fundamental matchup, I think Timmy has a tremendous advantage tonight, and I'm not a prop guy, but there's enough of you guys over there at Wager Talk that I'm starting to understand a lot of the opportunities you can find value, and you find value over time. You make profits, and it's good. And Skeet Profit is very good in the NBA. So, I was looking at a situation with Timmy being in the post, and he really should have a big night. And that's the one Achilles heel, I think, on the Baylor defense, is that they don't have that guy that is going to be able to handle him one-on-one, especially, you saw in the UCLA game how deep he got it there in those first 3 possessions of the first overtime. Well, there was only one overtime. And he scored that 6 points, and that was so easy, it was ridiculous. You almost think, like, why didn't they give him the ball the whole time? But that was because they were pushing him out. I don't think Baylor has that, and furthermore, it makes Baylor's defense is very aggressive. They love generating steals and turnovers, and they score rapidly off those turnovers. I think they're number 1 in the nation or number 2 in points scored within 5 seconds off of a turnover, steal, whatever. Even missed shots. 3-pointers many times more than not, will rebound longer away from the rim than a mid-range jumper. So that too gives them a chance to run. However, with Timmy being in the post, that eliminates or minimizes Baylor's aggressiveness of clogging passing lanes, anticipating, side-to-side passing by Gonzaga. And if they can't do that and Timmy is just dominating, when do they double team? And are they going to double team? Because Gonzaga has, 4 of the guys that are just waiting for the ball. Timmy he has great vision. He's going to find the open guy. So which poison do you pick? Or do you think I'm completely wrong with Timmy having such a big advantage tonight?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for Baylor on the defensive end in the paint, John. It's been brought up time and time again within the last 3 Gonzaga games how many points they get in the paint. And it's not all Drew Timmy, but when you watch their offense, it's a lot of motion, it's a lot of dribble handoffs, and eventually one of those handoffs winds up with a guy turning the corner and getting to the rim. Baylor would love for teams to, put it on the deck, just dribble, where they can guard one-on-one out on the perimeter because they're athletic enough. Obviously, Davion Mitchell, one of the best on-ball defenders in college basketball this year, but that's what they want, and it's not what Gonzaga does. Gonzaga pass, move, until we saw it again against UCLA. How many times these guys wind up just getting right down the lane and to the rim? I think what kept that game close in the first half was a bunch of missed layups by Gonzaga. They had a ton of chances at
That's
the rim,
true.
and they missed about 5 or 6 point blank. So I don't think Baylor can keep them out. I mean, guys like Flotamba, they've got height, but when you're talking about Drew Timme, it's those moves that he has, the up and unders, the ball fake one way and reverse the other way, reverse pivots, stuff like that, where he just gets or the typical big guy off balance. He's so mobile and so athletic down there. So I do think they'll have trouble. He's got a huge advantage. Like you say, the advantage for Gonzaga is that he's a good passer out of that as
Yeah.
well. If they want to drop a double team, it causes trouble. And it's almost impossible to double team because if you do, Corey Kispert, again, where Baylor's concerned, there's 4 guys that are sharpshooters from beyond the arc. For Gonzaga, there's one real sharpshooter, Corey Kispert, and then there's guys. Jalen Suggs can make a 3, yes. Nembhard can make a 3, yes. But they're not necessarily high percentage guys. So that's why they try to get the ball to the rim quite a bit. But it's hard to double team down low when you have those guys running free. Suggs will eat you up. If it's not from the 3-point line, he'll get to the rim. So, when you analyze this game just from X's and O's, the way you just did for Timme offensively on Gonzaga, and if you do the same for Baylor, it's hard to make a case for either team being able to stop the other from getting good looks. I think, in my opinion, it would have to be a game of really below average poor shooting, things that these teams haven't done throughout the year. Remember, Baylor's the number 1 3-point shooting team in all of NCAA basketball this year. And Gonzaga, I think, effective field goal percentage number 1. You got 2 great offenses. They'd have to go right in the tank tonight for this game not to be a high-scoring affair. For Baylor, I think the advantage is, we'll go real quick here, but we saw Johnny Juzang and Jaquez and Tiger Campbell, those 3 guards or swings for UCLA, pretty easily get past Gonzaga defenses. They're quick. They're good to the rim. So if you apply that to Baylor with Mitchell, with Teague, with Butler, and all these guys that can get past their man, that's problematic for the Gonzaga side. I really think it's a barring missed shots and plenty of them. I think that this is probably a really high-scoring game and should be a lot of fun. I think, again, if we go back, John, to say mid-January, when all of us in the handicapping betting industry and most college insiders across the nation felt that Gonzaga and Baylor were clearly the 1-2 teams in the country. They were power rated that way by bookmakers, and they were held in that regard by all of us. And here we are. Those are the 2 we wound up getting after, everything unfolded. So it should be really good.
Yeah, I agree. We had a lot of crazy upsets along the way, but the cream rises to the top. And, I think, I was saying more when, Timmy's in the post and he's going to pass. Say he does pass it out to Suggs, then Baylor's going to have a guy running at Suggs, and that's probably just a disaster waiting to happen for Baylor. Because if a guy's running at him, to your point, I think you said he'll go right around him. And then if he's challenged going up to the rim, he can just hand it off literally to Timme for a dunk. So I kind of visualize that. Maybe it doesn't happen tonight, but I'm kind of interested to see that little chess game going on, because that's one of the games within the game that we like to watch. And the other thing I took away from the UCLA game, and UCLA started doing it in the second half, but the turnovers that UCLA was getting was off of picks. So they overplayed the Gonzaga defense, overplayed the pick, forced the ball handler to reverse direction. As soon as he reverses direction, he's face-to-face with another Gonzaga player. And I thought that was a very good call by the coaching staff of Gonzaga, because that did work. But then UCLA, to Cronin's credit, adjusted to it. And the whole second half, I don't think I remember seeing more than one those situations that was happening in the second half. However, UCLA's defense was doing it to Gonzaga's ball handlers. But yeah, that whole storyline was Suggs. I remember it, but maybe you don't remember the particular defensive play. But it was, it was coming down the stretch, and he left the UCLA kid to score. What's his name again?
Yeah, Johnny Juzang.
Juzang. Okay, there we go. With all due respect to him. Suggs left him wide open in the corner three, and that tied the game. I think that's what knotted it up at 91, if I remember right. So you could see, the coaches were not happy with him when he came off the floor, but then, like champions do, he forgets that play, and then he makes some unbelievable plays. The block shot, and then what was that? Like 3/4 of the court, at least half court, one bounce pass.
Yeah, that was tremendous.
Oh my God, it was like Magic Johnson. I'm dating myself now, but.
Yep.
And, of course, the game winner. And I do believe, and I guess it'll come out, or maybe it already did come out, I think he thought he made it as soon as he saw the trajectory.
Yeah.
And he started going off to the left to that table, because I did see a tweet where he always wanted to be like Dwayne Wade. Remember when Dwayne Wade jumped on the table? And he basically did the same thing. So I imagine as a kid growing up, and that was his hero, that he probably practiced that shot quite a bit in the driveway, quite a bit in the arenas, and there it was. Just put right up on the tee for him to hit it out of the park, and he did. Because you're thinking like, oh my God, it's going to go second overtime. This is incredible, and then all of a sudden, just like that, it's over. It's over.
Yeah, no, it was, and that's like I said. I think UCLA was stunned. Let me get back to a couple of things you hit on here, as far as fundamentals go, and the fact that what they call in basketball terms a hard hedge, where the guy comes out to aggressively. It's an aggressive double team at the ball while it's on the perimeter, and generally speaking, it's a big guy who comes out and then has to scramble back into position, but. Like you say, when Gonzaga started running that hard hedge at UCLA, so when you don't expect it to be coming, it can be problematic. And I don't know that UCLA expected it. Mark Few employed it at a pretty good time. But then again, as you mentioned, Mick Cronin, and his team, they're good enough passers to, they're going to hedge after the ball, and they get rid of the ball quick enough. So once you see it, and especially with these two teams that we're going to see tonight, if we've talked a lot about Gonzaga, UCLA, but if we go to the early game, Baylor and Houston has, and you can't downgrade how good Houston's defensive ability is out on the perimeter. Those four guards have been trouble for teams all season long, and Baylor made them look like a junior varsity team, especially the first half, and then it continued into the second half. But what Baylor did so well was they passed the basketball. It was pass, but it seemed like they always had an open look. The ball always ended up in somebody's hands who was wide open, and that just doesn't happen to Houston. It just doesn't happen to Houston. And, when you watch that, and then you try to put Gonzaga's defense in Houston's place, they're not the same guys.
Yeah, it's true.
They do not have four perimeter players that guard like Houston does, with hands that force turnovers, with aggressiveness after the ball. They play a different style. And I think, as we said on Friday, you don't really have to shoot a high percentage to score a lot against Gonzaga, because they will allow you points. But you have to try and outscore them. And for Baylor tonight, if they run the offense that they ran, and I know they hit a lot of threes, but that's what they're good at, right? They're best in the nation. One more time. They're liable to have a lot of open looks tonight in that contest. And I think on the Gonzaga side, if you want to take Davion Mitchell for Baylor, who's such a great defender, if you want to try and take him out of the game, you spread the floor, which is what Gonzaga does best, right? You spread the floor and don't give him an opportunity to just get up on a guy and play him tight nose to nose. Spread it with passes. It takes that effectiveness away. Again, I'm drawing up a lot of scenarios just off of what we've seen out of these two teams, the way they play, and it seems like a perfect style fit for points. I think the first half total was 75.5 before we came on air. The game total was 159.5. Last week we hit on a bunch of non-conference teams that are especially good non-conference teams that Gonzaga scored massively against. 98 against Virginia, the game hit 173. 88 against West Virginia, the game hit 169. Scored big on Kansas, the game hit 192. But both those teams, by the way, Kansas and West Virginia, from the Big 12, much like Baylor. I don't know, John. The number would sound big in essence. You look at it, wow, 159.5, that's huge. But these two teams kind of make it look small, and they may make it
Yeah,
look
they
small
do.
enough. So
They absolutely do.
the Juzang story is great because John Calipari caught a ton of heat right off the bat when Juzang, I think maybe the second game he went crazy, or maybe it was the Michigan State game, whichever one in this tournament. And, Kentucky fans started jumping John Calipari. How'd you let that one go? But I think the bigger point is to his talent. We know what kind of freshman classes Kentucky brings in year after year after year. You can see it all across the NBA. And Johnny Juzang was part of one of those classes. That's how good he was thought of. And I think just because West Coast basketball isn't quite viewed nationally because it's on so late at night, it took this tournament to bring Johnny Juzang to the forefront, Jaquez to the forefront, Tiger Campbell to the forefront. But boy, what a collection of athletes. And give the big guy some credit in that game.
Absolutely.
He was tremendous.
Yes, he was. Rebounding, too, was huge.
Yeah, that's a very good team. And with Mick Cronin having another year of recruiting, I would say, watch out for UCLA in the Pac-12.
Yeah, they have. We talked about it on the shows. I researched the rosters. They have 7 top 100 high school athletes on it. So, and that was even before they beat Michigan. So, it's another angle in handicapping now that when I write down notes to look at next year or the beginning of the season, I'll be able to remind myself that the number of top 100 recruits on a basketball team sometimes can provide information of especially a West Coast team, to your point, that we don't see nearly as much as we do a Villanova or a Kansas or a Duke or a North Carolina or whatever.
Right.
And that's a valuable piece of information, I think. So in terms of the outstanding player, I think this is based on the Final Four, but it's usually the last championship game. Timmy now is in even money, plus 100, and Suggs is plus 125. The third guy on the team is Ayayi, plus 1,200. At the end of the day, if Gonzaga wins, it's either going to be Timmy or Suggs. So I don't really think there's too much value in betting either one of those. But if you like Baylor, you had mentioned Davion Mitchell, I think, right? Mm-hmm. As a prop bet for a lot of different things. Jared Butler is plus 700. And, if there was a long shot that could, have a huge night, I think it might be him. Like you said, there's a lot of different scenarios here we can paint. Probably an infinite number. And I also like Jared Butler over 2.5 made 3-pointers. So I think he's going to make 3. And I'm also getting paid plus 135 at DraftKings right now. And I think it's a little bit higher even at MGM, which was puzzling to me because this is going to be a high-scoring game. If it's a high-scoring game, why isn't the public all over every single one of these players like they are in some other of the props? For example, points, rebounds, and assists. Timmy's 31.5, over is minus 113, so that's not too bad. Ayayi over 21.5 points, rebounds, and assists, minus 127 juice. Mayer over 14, minus 121. Suggs minus 118, over 26.5. Kispert 125 vig, over 24. And the over is being bet a lot in these prop bets by everyone. So then, why then is the 3-pointers? Davion Mitchell over 2.5 made 3-pointers, plus 135. If you bet under 3 or under 2.5, that means he only makes 2 or 1. There's only 3 possible outcomes: none, 1, or 2. You have to lay 177. And that just seems like borderline asinine. I mean, I wouldn't do that. As we like to say, now I wouldn't do that with Steve Merrill's money.
And we like to bet Steve Merrill's
Yeah, apparently he's got a lot of it because every time I do bet it, it loses. So that's a good friend to have. But seriously, I mean, these under bets, Teague under 2.5 3-pointers, -159. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And when I don't understand it, I don't play it. But I think, now Butler is +125 instead of the 135 that I got earlier in the day for over 2.5 made 3-pointers. But I mean, if he's going to have a big night and at +700 come away with the most outstanding player of the game or the Final Four, that seems to be something that would happen in the first half.
So to show you real quick how well dispersed Baylor's three-point shooters have been when you talk about having made 3 3-pointers in a game, so far in this tournament, 4 guys have done it once. One guy has done it twice. The one guy who's done it twice is Maceo Teague. He's made 3 2 times. But Jared Harper has done it once. Davion Mitchell has done it once. Adam Flagler has done it once. So that's, again, that goes back to the point that I was trying to make before, that they are so well-rounded. And let's not slight Matt Meyer, who hit 2 threes.
That's true.
And at 6'9" can come in and fill it up in an instant. You've got 5 guys to choose from here. So in my estimation, I didn't mention this before, but you just did, and thank you for jogging my memory here. I think the best of the props probably would be Drew Timme, points, rebounds, assists, the combined total over 31.5. He's going to rebound. He's going to score. And as you pointed out, he's a very good passer down low. So over 31.5 seems like one. But if you're going to pick a Baylor guy to make 2 or more than 2 threes, take the biggest shots on the board. Like I say, Maceo Teague is the guy that's done it twice, and everybody else has done it once. So you've got your pick of the litter. You don't have to necessarily play the favorite if there is a favorite. I don't know who's you said one guy was -157 or something crazy, though.
That was on the points. Points, rebounds, and assists was all. Oh, no, it's on the. If you're betting the under, the juice is very high.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're.
Bet over, yeah.
Like Matt Moyer, over 1.5 3-pointers made, +135. And now that's on my radar because you just brought it to my attention.
Very capable. Very capable.
And it is all I need is 2. If you bet the under, you have to lay -175 juice for 2 possible outcomes, 0 and 1. Yeah. That's you just don't bet under, even if you are a genius and Mayer makes none.
Right.
You don't lay those kind of odds, but +135 is attractive to take a shot there. Now the reason I was thinking Butler was that, do you think maybe Baylor, because it's a championship game, and say one of these guys catches fire, Teague or Butler on Baylor, and they just start filling up the 3-point shot. Say one of them has 3 at the half. Do they then change and then just keep feeding the hot guy, or do they stick to the game that the style play that got them here?
Yeah, well, I think what I was going to say when you were talking about Matt Meyer, real quick, is that I think you said his total was over. All he has to do is make 2 to win the bet. And these Baylor kids can make 2 in 30 seconds, to your point of the same guy shooting when he's hot. Now, I'm going to make one more quick point here about something we talked about from the very beginning of the tournament, which was the Lucas Oil Stadium venue, right? This will be the 3rd straight game these guys are there. Now, Jared Butler had been in a miserable slump shooting in this particular tournament until the last 2 games. The last 2 games, he's now 6 of 8 from 3-point range. Both of those games played at this venue. So 75% makes on threes in this venue. And tonight, to make 3, that's a pretty good risk to take, I would think. He's seeing it well. He gets opportunity. Maceo Teague, the same thing. He gets opportunity. I think I saw him with 7 3-pointers the previous game, attempts-wise, so you're going to get 7 shots at the basket. And last game, he had 5. So that's an average of 6 attempts per game. And these guys are seeing it well. Davion Mitchell, same thing. If you can find plus price, to your point, with these guys, I think you just take over. And in a game where it figures to, for quite a bit of the time, be played spread out, quicker tempo, where those threes, they call them step-in threes or walk-in threes, where you're coming down the floor, you catch the ball, boom, all in rhythm. Probably see a lot of those. I just think that the fact that these two teams have played in this particular venue now for the 3rd straight game, shooting gets better. And with the day off in between, I don't know that fatigue bothers the legs where shots are concerned. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you, John. Why would you bet under? I mean, if you bet under, you better just go watch 2 hours of Andy Griffith reruns or something, because it's going to be hard to watch.
Or, I guess find out the type of mushrooms that Tony talks about and start eating them. But, one other final point here I wanted to make, before we let everybody go here, like the in-game tonight, I think is going to be an opportunity because of the high total. Now, the books are going to give you alternate betting lines, alternate betting totals. You can bet anything here at MG. Oh, this is DraftKings, from over 148, which is minus 400, all the way up to 171.5 plus 295. So I think what is better than doing that is the in-game is possibly going to give you those two numbers. And I just gave you the complete range that DraftKings has, and MGM has a similar range as well. And I'm sure all the other books do too. Yep. So I think if we do get out to either a very fast start or a very slow start, you're going to see those numbers. You're going to see 150 or slightly lower. It'll be very similar to the what was the show we were doing, Rob? Was it USC Gonzaga or was it Creighton Gonzaga? It might have been Creighton.
Both of those days.
Yeah, I think both of them were great examples, though.
Maybe Creighton was the example, John, because the first 5 minutes of that game were so high scoring, it seemed like it was going to hit 200. And then it fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that with Gonzaga, the pace all of a sudden just stops. And whether it's because who knows what the reason is. It's typical of a Gonzaga game at times. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to tweet it when I do it, but that's hard to do because I'm pressing submit. And, at that point, it sounds selfish, but I'm more concerned about getting that pizza money in than tweeting what I'm doing. But, for transparency purposes, I'm going to look at 150 or lower as an in-game bet to play over. And then I'm going to look at 172 is the number I came up with my models. This goes up to 171.5, so really, who cares? 172, I will bet under. And then we'll see about playing the middle. And, I agree with you, Rob. If I'm going to lose one of these, it's the under. I think, if you bet in-game anything close to 150, 149, 148, 152, I think that's an outstanding bet. But, trying to fade two powerhouse offenses like this oftentimes doesn't work out. But if I can get 12 extra points of value, then the under all of a sudden looks a little bit better.
Yeah, I think you've had, in discussing this tournament all the way through, you've had a number of 83 attached to Gonzaga. I think that was the number.
81 and 87.
Yeah, and there, nobody stops them from getting there. Now, I think your numbers indicate point spread-wise how often they will cover if they hit 81 or 87. Or something to that effect. But if they get to 87, the other team's coming with them. In this case, what would it take, John? It's 87-73 is an absolute blowout to get over, and I don't think the margin of victory at the end will be that large. So if Gonzaga makes it to 81, you need 79 out of the other side to get to 160, which Baylor has seen 80 points quite a bit this season. So again, it's really hard to make a case for under unless there's just really poor shooting. I just don't, in my mind, and I could be wrong, I don't see it being a product of great defense that holds this down.
I
I
agree.
see it more a product of, and Baylor's very adept at getting to the foul line because their guards penetrate. Gonzaga gets to the foul line. Timmy and company. I don't know, just the way I see it. I thought it might open up a little bit higher. It didn't, and it hasn't really carried as of yet, right? I think I saw today, someplace got to 161 and turned around at that point. So maybe a couple of different syndicates going back and forth. One likes over, one likes under. You see that battle a lot. But to me, I think you got to stick with these over bets, player props, and the Drew Timmy prop, of course. I think
Yep.
we could recommend here on the show. The two of us perfectly aligned with
Yep.
that. He should get over 31.5, all things combined.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We'll make that the best bet for the show. And then we'll make the other ones, leans, because leans are pizza money in my interpretation. But, with this trying to play this middle, if I'm lucky enough to get something around 150, we'll be able to see the game then evolve. And if the game is evolving into, averaging, 5.5 points per minute, and that's how I calculate these things for the in-game stuff, then there's not going to be any reason to do the under, even if it is at 172. So that's why I emphasize it's very hard for me to communicate it, online or through Twitter, direct message, text, whatever. There's not enough. I don't have my fingers aren't that fast enough to be able to do everything. But I'll do my best to, if I get one leg of it and it's the under, don't be surprised if, and you'll be able to tell without even looking at me if the game is going up and up and up. You don't stand in front of that. That's the one caveat, I guess, with this. And I'm hoping that I get the chance to get the bottom half first, because again, if they start out super fast like the Creighton game, 52 points in 10 minutes, which is what they did with Creighton, and that total was 172 at that time. Actually, someplace had 175 from what I was told, but BetMGM was 172.5. It's still going to be, you might see it fall back down to 158, but then I if it goes that way, I think I'd grab the 158 because that's actually a point and a half lower than where it is now.
Right. Yeah, the great thing about Gonzaga is that, and we just talked about it with UCLA, right? They can withstand first 4-minute jitters, first 5-minute jitters that lead to a low-scoring game, which for what you're looking at would bring the total down and maybe get you the low half first, right? They can withstand. They can go through a 12-8 first 6 minutes and end up 93-90. With them, 90-point halves in a Gonzaga game are almost more common than they are uncommon. So, to your point, you want to see maybe if you really want that low end first, you want to see maybe a little jitters to start the game, and then when they warm up, things go. But it may start, like you say, it may start and never stop either.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
in that case, you want to be in, as we call it, pre-flop. You'd rather be in at the 159 price because it's never coming back again.
I just quickly pulled up the highest scoring game in NCAA history, which, well, at least the last 25 years. Or back to 1985. It's 193. It was actually an overtime game, Purdue. And I wanted to see what the total was. The total was 147.5. So they were even close. Let's see what the highest total was real quick before we sign off here.
I'm trying to think of a really high-scoring championship game.
All right, so believe it or not, the lowest is 110.5. That had involved Princeton.
Butler and UConn? Oh.
Well, Princeton was before 85, right? Yeah. The Four Corners was not then. The highest total is 167. So let's ask the database here, how do NCAA tournament games with a total of, let's say, 159 and higher. Total greater than 159.5. Yeah. So I got nothing out of it. 16 and 14 to the under. So that didn't help us.
50-50 shot.
But there was a stretch here from the 2016 tournament. Holy moly. Let me just put in 2016 because this is a definition of an anomaly. Season greater than 2016. Season equals 200. 2016. The unders in the 2016 tournament that were 159 or higher went 6-2 to the under. The first 2 games of the tournament actually went over, and then the rest 6 in a row went under. And Kentucky, North Carolina, was that the final?
Is that the year North Carolina won?
I think it is off the top of my head. So that game was 161, and the final was 158. So it almost went over. But I mean, I don't think we can find 2 teams in the history of the NCAA tournament matched up that have the offensive power that these 2 have. So.
Yeah, UNC was a absolute offensive powerhouse that year. The final score, John, was it a win by margin?
Let's see. It was 75-73 North Carolina. And it definitely was the final because I have a category called rest. Rest for both teams was 1, so that means it had to be the final. The line was Kentucky +2, so that pushed. And the over-under went under by 13. It was 148. I added it up wrong. It was not 150. It was 148.
Right.
So that's pretty. I mean, that's interesting. It doesn't really tell us much, but to recap, we're doing over 31.5. Timmy points, rebounds, assists, and what was the lean? The lean was over for the game and over Gonzaga points.
And
I think those.
We're not going to talk anybody off of if you want to play a Baylor guard, they're over 3-pointers and get a plus price with that. Any guard of your choice. I can't really recommend one, but if you have a preference for Teague, if you have a preference for Butler, if you have a preference for Mitchell, if you can find a plus price with those guys, you can't talk you off of that because any of these guys, Matt Meyer, off the bench,
1.5.
He doesn't get the regard that the others do, but 1.5 is a small number for a guy. Again, he's going to end up in the NBA. This is an NBA player with NBA range, so we're not going to talk off of any of those guys.
No, absolutely. Well, anyway, Rob, I guess we'll sign off here. Hopefully tomorrow we'll have Tony back at a prior commitment. Mm-hmm. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send us direct messages if you want anything we didn't cover or you want further explanation. I'll try to get back to you, as will Rob. So for Rob Vino, myself, and the Predictive Playbook, may all the wins be yours.